Welcome to Attuned for Wholeness with me, Lisa Pinney. Life is full of uncertainty, confusion, and heartache. It gets hard to manage at times. This show will combine your lived experience with self-awareness and prayer to help you navigate through those tough times. You know, those ones that keep you from living in a place of true harmony, fully attuned to your body, your soul, and your spirit. Attunement is a spiritual practice of getting emotionally honest and connecting with God so we can recover from daily life and our souls can go back to a place of rest. Together, we'll move away from the unhealthy ways of coping that temporarily alleviate the pressure, but ultimately leave us feeling more disconnected from our true selves. Attuned for Wholeness with me, Lisa Pinney, starts now. Hi, everyone. This is Lisa, and I'm back with Attuned for Wholeness. And today I have Lori Synder from Lori K. Snyder Ministries here as our guest, and she's going to talk about her healing journey from disillusionment with the church. It's a pretty cool story, and we're going to get right into it. But before we do, I'm going to say that for the third caller, we're going to be giving away a deck of my cut cards, which is like basically a small sampling of the Attuned app that's coming out in the spring. So for the third caller, I'm going to be sending out a gift. Welcome, Lori.
Hey, Lisa. Thanks. I'm so honored to be here.
Okay, so I know that in your mid-40s, you and your husband took this gigantic step of faith and decided to go to Bible school of some sort. Well, how about if I just ask you to tell me about it?
Sure. It is a unique story because we did not grow up in church, and my husband and I didn't come into a saving relationship with Jesus until right after we were married. And we moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and that's really where I say our spiritual journey began, because we got involved with a church by playing basketball. And that's how we found our first church. I know it was real spiritual, but we became very close with the pastor and his wife, and they just took us under our wing and really just helped us grow and mature. And that really just started our spiritual journey. And then they took on a different role in ministry. And so we changed churches. And shortly thereafter, my husband said, I think God's calling me into ministry. And I said, no, I don't think so. And that was in 1998. And then fast forward to 2011, we had just gone through a marital separation and a healing in that in and of itself. And then that call really came to my husband saying, I really feel like I need to go to Bible college. And at this point, I had gone through a really surrendering process and my own healing journey with the Lord. And so he left his executive position and we went to Bible college, and it was both of us to do it, not working. He left his executive career, but it was simply to know God, know his word, and who we are created to be. And it was just the Bible. It wasn't seminary. It was a Bible college. And that really was like a second honeymoon for us because he had been traveling, and it really just helped reset our family. But that's where we, what I say called experience heaven on earth, where we really got to see the gospel in action, being the hands and feet of Jesus and seeing signs and wonders and miracles happening just by being taught the word, and people were being set free just by the power of God's love and his truth.
So tell me, what happened that flipped everything around for you?
As far as going to Bible college, to surrender to saying yes?
Well, what was the disillusionment that you faced?
Well, we always served in the church, and that was always something that we are both very giving and very serving, and knowing that that's what we're called to do. But when we were in Bible college, the first church that we were a part of, it was the women's pastor who wanted me to help and serve. And then when I would try spiritual gifts, right, you take your spiritual gifts, and it always came up for me with shepherd and exhortation. Those were always my two highest. And so she would want me to come and help with the women's ministry. And then because I love to give encouragement and I was just speaking into her, she, what I call, pinned my ears back and said, Lori, you take care of the icebreakers. You leave the message to me. And it was just, that was like the first time that I just thought, what just happened? And
Mhm.
that became a repetitive pattern because we moved so much with my husband's career. Because again, we weren't in ministry, we were just
Mhm.
lay people, as you call it. And but it was the women pastors in the church that would be curious with me, want me to be involved in women's ministry, in leadership, but then always put me back in their place or in a place. And it just was a very devaluing message that they gave me. They did not want me. I just, they would not let me be seen or heard only for their purposes. And what I say is, you know, in Ephesians 4:12, it says that the fivefold ministry is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry for the building of the body of Christ. But what I was experiencing on a repetitive basis, no matter where I lived, what state, was they were taking it as building, or excuse me, is using or equipping the saints to do the ministry's work versus the work of the ministry. They weren't allowing me to utilize my gifts and helping me grow and disciple me to really run my race alongside
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah.
They just wanted me to use me for their purposes.
So it's hard enough being a woman in ministry, but then it gets a little territorial at times and makes it harder for other women. And I feel for your story. And there's lots of stories out there, but
Sure.
I feel for your story. You have to decide to play by the rules or go it solo. And if you go solo, then, you know, well, you have a Jezebel spirit. And I'm not about any of those things. Personally, I believe that if your gift makes room for you, so if there's no room for you here, go somewhere else and, you know, do what you feel to do in your heart. And I'm very glad, personally, I'm very glad I did it. That's all I will say about that. So tell me about the process you went through to experience restoration.
Sure. Well, a lot of heart work because I had to grieve. And it wasn't just a one time thing, it was a repetitive pattern. And then I first had to think, okay, what's wrong with me? Because I'm the common denominator.
Mm,
And I had to check my heart and say, am I prideful? You know, you go through all of the things. And I had a lot of different counseling with it, doing that heart work, but really it was the intimacy with the Lord. And so I would go into the word and say, okay, Jesus, where did you experience
mhm,
being rejected by the religious leaders? And I
mhm,
found comfort in the scriptures. I found comfort in identifying with Jesus. And so I literally would have to forgive, release, and bless. And that was a constant process. And there were times where I had to take a pause. I left ministry for a while and just had to take a pause to get away from it so I could really allow my heart to heal and hear from the Lord about where to go next.
mhm. So forgive, repent, all of that. Was it enough?
It
They
was, they
keep
were,
you in a cycle.
it
It's
kept me, yeah,
spinning.
it did. It kept me in a cycle because it would never leave me. I felt like I thought I'd already forgiven and it would come back up. It was kind of like a wound, you
Mhm,
know, that you have that you rub up against and it's bleeding again. And
mhm,
so it really wasn't until I met you and went through your resiliency training program to be a resiliency coach, which I wasn't planning on doing, but it was so necessary. I call that an unexpected journey that the Lord takes us on to enhance
Yeah.
our life. Um, and through helping me recognize what did my heart really long for, all I knew was I felt rejected and hurt. But what I didn't realize was I wanted to belong. I wanted to feel understood and seen and heard, that I wasn't being
Mhm,
prideful, that I wasn't trying to take over someone's job. I was just trying to
mhm,
run my own race, but I had no one. I had come from a sales professional background. And so all of my managers and leaders were always encouraging me and helping me do whatever it took to be successful. And then I entered into that church dynamic in women's ministry specifically. And it was just like, this was complete different, a difference from what I had experienced. So you helped me drill down to really see what did my heart really need. And then I could go to Jesus to have him fill it and then release it. And then to say, what we just experienced back in October, we did find a church. We moved a couple of years ago and found a local church. And
I
it's
was
been,
going to ask you about that. What are you
oh, sorry.
doing now?
Yeah, this is totally God's redemption. And this is what he does, right? There's a seed time and harvest process, and we've got to make room for him. And we've got to make room for us to be honest about our emotions and what those emotional desires are and have him meet them. But he's also going to have us do it with people. So my son had simply said, Mom, what if you went to church simply just to meet people? That's it. Just to meet people in the new neighborhood that you live. And so that's what we did in October. And now I've ministered twice, actually 3 times in the pulpit, and part of teaching a discipleship group, prayer ministry. I mean, so there's a lot that the Lord has suddenly done, although it was years of in the background, but it's just been him doing it and redeeming the time. But I had to have my heart right, or I would have just taken my past. And really what you had said to me too, Lisa, this summer, you had said, Lori, you have a pattern of taking your past and projecting it, or keep putting it into your present and projecting it into your future. So let's talk about that. Let's look at that. And that's when I realized I had had my voice stolen by a woman at a very young age. And that was a repetitive pattern for me. And so it was really just recognizing that and just allowing the Lord to heal that.
And recognizing the pattern, it's not necessarily something that started with whatever you're going through.
Right.
It could take on various forms, but it's the same pattern. So it's an issue with women. And I find it funny because I always had issues with girls. And then here I am.
I know.
I'm more the women predominantly all the time.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny?
The Lord has a sense of humor, I'm telling you.
when we learn to look back, not with regret, but to see the pattern, then we'll start to understand, oh, this is what was stolen. This is what was threatened. This is why I was triggered. And every time you have another sequential issue, it creates more like a wall that gets built up instead of a domino effect where things are being knocked down. And when we did the resiliency program and we coached and we have our conversations now, it's one more domino after another that gets knocked down and the walls start to come down. And when the walls come down, you get to breathe again. And you feel like yourself, and you start being able to, they can do what they want. I'm going to do what I want. And there's no judgment there. There's just an ease and a freedom and an ability to walk in all that you want, all that God put in your heart. And it's a good path, but it's hard getting through that journey. I feel like God is really exposing a lot of church hurt. It's a hot button issue. Ooh, it's a hot button issue. And if I could say anything, there are some people that will never walk back into a church, and I respect that. I get it. There are some people that have remained in their church and have suffered under the weight of it. For you and for people that have left, there's hope, there's restoration. I even hate using the word restoration in regards to church hurt because that word can be triggering. And people are like, I don't know if I want to be restored like that. They want the pure gospel. They want Jesus, but they don't want all the other stuff. So what would you say to them, to those people that are listening and are searching and are hurting?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one, I definitely have compassion and empathy for them.
Mhm.
And it is a process. And that's where I always go back to, it's going to have to be through your intimate relationship with the Lord, through his word, through his Holy Spirit leading and guiding you, and having at least one or two people that are mature in their faith journey to walk alongside you to help you process
Yeah.
those feelings and help you say, okay, is this true, or is this just your perception of it? And then just really being able to talk openly. But I would say there's hope and healing, and hurting people hurt people, right? We hear that
Right.
cliche, but insecure people tend to hurt people. So I just had to look at, this is their insecurity. And I had to be secure in myself and what God has put in me, and not look to them for that validation, not look to them
Right.
for my worth or my approval or to
Mhm.
belong. And really, it comes down to trusting the Lord, because we are the body. We're to be together. And there are places, I will say, it is not probably safe for you to go back to that particular place, but there is a place for you. So don't lose heart. Don't give up, because the Lord will make a way. And I am living proof, because we had gone by this church for, a year and a half, and like, yeah, no. And then it was suddenly, but my heart was ready, and everything just finally
So
worked.
let's go back. You talked about having a few mature people that will listen to you. I call it holding space. But in that space, it's letting someone express every emotion that they have,
Yes.
every emotion.
Yeah.
And there's a grieving that goes along with it.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's a word vomit that goes with it.
Yes. Yes.
Because
Without judgment.
when a person feels safe enough to talk to you, and they know they're not going to be judged, and they know they're not going to be given a spiritual cliche to put a band-aid on a huge wound, they're going to like really gravitate, and then they'll lean in.
Yeah.
Then when they feel safe, they'll lean in, and they'll do the work.
Yeah.
They'll start to unveil their heart, and that's when Jesus can move in.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
is a whole process.
Yeah.
We're talking about it like it's a flyover. It's
No.
not. There's a lot that goes into it, because after you get honest, that ugly honest, then you have to unpack all of the religious beliefs.
Yeah.
Oh, can I trust my emotions? Because I was told I couldn't. Um, that's crazy.
Yeah.
God gave us those emotions for a reason. So I'm
Yeah.
not quite feeling that one. And who do I trust? That's where you really learn and figure out what you believe and you don't believe. Because where there's church wounding, many people just deconstruct. And that's where like all the nonsense gets stripped away.
Right. Right. And, we tend to look at them as our spiritual leaders, and what they say is what we're supposed to trust. And so that's where it gets really confusing, because then we're thinking, am I not spiritual enough? Am I not in faith?
Mhm.
And we start to second guess ourselves. And so that's why I'm
Mhm.
saying, like, I had my husband, and so we were able to really, and I experienced more hurt than he did. He had definitely some, but it was because it was really more of what I was involved with on a day-to-day basis that it hit me more. So yeah, it's so important that we just don't, um, the forgiveness part gets thrown out a lot. You just need to forgive. You can't have offense,
Mhm.
right? You hear a lot about that. Don't be offended, and so forth. And it's easy to say, but then we shut down conversation when
Mhm.
we do that. And we
Well,
need,
and what about the place where you truly are offended? If you say, don't be offended, what are you supposed to do?
right.
I need to deal with my own stuff my own way.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, but no thank you. Your thing
Yeah.
isn't working for me.
Yeah. Because
I
Jesus said,
can't.
we're going to get offended.
Yeah.
Offense is going to come, but we're not going to own it. That's the whole thing, is I'm not going to own someone else's stuff.
Mhm.
And
And
so,
then forgiveness is only one portion of it.
yes.
Then there is the fact that you that offense, that wound, that deep hurt has to be healed.
Mhm.
And first, it's healed in the presence of God as you do business with Him, as you ask those questions that really actually fill your heart back up and allow you to trust again. But then it has to be filled in community.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, Lisa, too. I think this is important that I say this is, I was involved deeply in leadership. So it wasn't like I was just a member and just went and got offended and, hurt my feelings. No, this was one that I was part of the leadership and so forth. And I wanted to run a lot of times. I'm like, I don't need this. And the
Mhm.
Lord would have me go back. And it almost became like, seriously, Lord, I need to do this. And he's like, I want to show you some things. You're not going to understand it right now, but you will in the future. And it's going to serve you and what you're called to do. And so I had to trust that. And I will tell you, Lisa, I grieved. I would be sitting in during worship and I would be grieving. And so it's very real. And I've talked to a lot of women because of coaching who experience the same type of thing. And then we feel bad. Like, I shouldn't be grieving in church over church. It's like, no, it's all part of it. Jesus did.
Well, I just had a conversation with somebody the other day about how I would walk into church, take a deep breath, and armor up just to be there. And that's that's the way it was. And then I would have to like fight my way through worship to get to that place where I'm like able to let my guard down enough and focus on the Father.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, those were some tough times. And,
Yeah.
like you were saying, you were given a chance and you were pushed down in ministry. I was in ministry too, but when I turned my ministry into a business, or what I like to call a bizmin,
Yeah.
um, all the opportunities within my church went away. So referrals stopped coming. And that's their model. They want volunteers. They don't want to play favorites. So if you are a business, they can't. And I get that on one level, but it took me 3 years to find that piece of information out. So for at least 3 years, I was like, my mind was spinning. What am I doing here? Why is this happening? Um, and the bitterness was starting to take root. And
Right.
that's something you and I have talked about, the bitterness. Oof. But you wouldn't have known it because I can put on a poker face.
We can wear that facade pretty well, right? Smile through it. I'm blessed. I'm blessed.
So it's really tough whether you stay or go when you're hurt by people who are believers, when you're hurt by leaders.
Right.
It requires such an intense amount of healing. Mm.
Yeah.
At first I thought it was me. And
Yeah.
like you, then one day God spoke to me and said, there's a purpose in all of this. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll go with you. That's when I gave my yes, that's when I really that started to be able to transition away from the hurt
Yeah.
and towards restoration
Yeah.
or towards the freedom. So,
Yeah.
okay, we have a few minutes left. Lori, tell us how everybody can get in touch with you.
Sure. My website is loriksnyder.com. that's the easiest way. And you'll find all my socials. I do have a podcast called Created to Thrive podcast. And that is where I help people grow deeper in their relationship with the Lord, really unlock their true potential and become resilient and thrive emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and relationally.
Okay. And then when people, if they're looking for a coach, what kind of coaching do you do? What's your niche?
I really, at this point, coach women,
Mhm.
anyone that is really hungry to go deeper in their relationship with the Lord. I also am a Bible teacher, so there's spiritual growth, but really helping people grieve betrayal in marriage or really
Okay.
any relationship. So that emotional piece with the spiritual piece.
All right. So thanks, Lori, for being my guest, and thanks for letting me be your guest too
Yeah,
on
thank
your
you.
podcast.
Yeah.
If you need to get in touch with me, you can go to my website, wholenessandpractice.com. And remember, the Attuned app is coming out in the spring, and currently I am looking for a few more coaches to be a part of this app, to be listed on the app, but I'm not going to let it get a really big listing. So if you're interested, go to my website and make sure you join me every first and third Wednesday of the month, 4:30 Eastern Standard Time and 1:30 Pacific Time, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. And the next time I'm on, I will have a new guest. His name is Scott Moore, and he's going to be talking to you about the brain and how it affects our emotional heart. So if you need anything more, just know that we're praying for you. You can always reach out to us for coaching. Both of us coach. Lori does more grief. I do more anxiety and trauma. So I want to thank you again. And until next time. Thanks for tuning in to Attuned for Wholeness. I hope you got the tune-up you needed today. Keep tuning in on the first and third Wednesday of every month at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time and 3:30 Central Time on ttm.com for more conversations around caring for our emotional health and spiritual well-being. I'd like to invite you to consider becoming a resiliency coach to develop the skills that will help others heal and bounce back quicker from negative events. Or maybe you're someone who's looking for a holistic and spiritual path to move through anxiety and unresolved trauma. For both of these resources, visit my website at www.wholenessandpractice.com. And thank you for listening to Attuned for Wholeness on Transformation Talk Radio.